Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 9, Episode 6 of The Flash. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we have Becky's return, which, once again, it's been so long since I didn't remember Becky at all. Obviously, they gave us a little recap at the beginning. I'm like, oh God, it's been so long, dude. That's also the thing. Like, once again, I've seen every season of The Flash, every episode, one time. So they said, like, oh, didn't Becky die like 5 years ago? And it's like, yeah, but after Crisis, she lucked out and she was one of the people brought back. I was like, well, 5 years ago, if we should just subtract season-wise, at the very least, if it didn't fall back into season 3 timeline-wise and stuff like that, like how far back that would be if that didn't fall into season 3 territory, I would assume that's season 4 territory, which I'm like, was she one of DeVoe's metas? Was she a bus meta from DeVoe? Or was it a season, or was it like a Savitar season 3 thing? I have no idea, I don't remember. But yeah, either way, she died, but she came back because of Crisis, and yeah, she's like, yeah, my luck used to hurt people. Anytime it give me good luck and make other people have bad luck. But now she's got more control of her powers. She ends up finding her true love, and they ultimately end up getting engaged. But then her powers start going haywire, and now it's like, oh, all she's having is terrible luck. And then it's like, oh, now her fiance is potentially murdered, but it turns out he was just knocked out and put in a coma, but still. And now she's the number one suspect. And even Kramer's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it's an open and shut thing, even though it seems like it should be, because she's like, I get this gut feeling, which obviously Cecile's like, yeah, Joe gets those all the time. So if you've got it, I trust that gut of yours of like, yeah, something's off here. So, but, yeah. And so Becky's luck is worse and worse because it's like, right. Because Cecile's like, don't worry, you're not going to go to prison for like a week. You're going to be here most likely at the jails for like a couple of days because she's got to get home to Joe and them. Because obviously it's been a little while since the last episode. So she has done the whole like every weekend going over to Jenna, and Jenna's birthday's coming up. So she's ready to make like Jenna like her traditional birthday breakfast. But the problem is the case got a lot more serious when the attempted murder weapon and stuff like that shows up, which it looks like it's one of her heels that broke early on when she met Dom, but maybe Dominic, but maybe it's just a different heel in general. But regardless, they've got to do everything they can to prove her innocence. So we have Cecile working with Allegra, while Barry and Iris are away kind of enjoying their their little getaway. And so it's interesting when you have to work in conjunction with someone who's literally making things worse and worse with her terrible luck because her luck's flipped upside down. But the interesting development they introduced early on, I love the fact is that Cecile was trying to rock the bottles, and then like when because they went to a place because it turns out, oh, Dom might be a gambler or something. He might be super in debt. He didn't want to tell you that. But yeah, it's like, well, there's no way Dom would like keep a secret from me. It's like, oh, he's not that type of person. He's not bad. Like, there's no way he'd gamble or something like that. But then they go to the place and it ends up being, isn't that the same bar or whatever that Mark worked at and stuff like that? Either way, I love that one guy like who got held at gunpoint. He's like, I hate working here. I hate working here. It's like probably like every time you turn around, there's something going down. But I love that when Cecile tried to help, like the bottles were rattling, and then like one bottle fell on the floor and just did nothing. I was like, oh, interesting. It didn't even fly towards you. It just. And they're like, and initially when Allegra's able to use her power, I was like, oh, that's all I need to be like, oh yeah, it's not Becky, especially because the bottles were shaking. Like, if her powers were really unlucky, they would just probably like, in her attempt to attack them, it would have flung at her immediately. It didn't, it just fell because her powers are split because she's herself is a little off. Her powers were off. So it doesn't help that when they show up later on, they have tech that can counter meta abilities, so they end up countering Allegra's light powers. Also, side note, is this our first time seeing Allegra like basically have blacklight vision? I'm like, have we showcased that all before? I'm like, was it just last season that she really came into her powers like fully like she reached the next level Wasn't that I want to say that might have been last season. That might even been season 6, but I want to say that was like last season. Like her powers like severely like upgraded. So it's just, I mean, we've only got little peeks into it here and there because obviously like her like fully going all out doesn't come up that often. So, but her just like using it's like, oh yeah, it's shades. She kind of like uses her like, I mean, it makes sense with her abilities and stuff. But I'm like, yo, that's the first time we've seen her kind of do that, isn't it? I think so. But either way, Becky ended up getting taken, kind of blaming herself, because obviously Cecile was frustrated with the circumstances and being like, oh, Becky's such bad luck. And it's like, no, I am. Like, I've caused trouble for everyone in my life with my bad luck. And it's just kind of, I should leave, and ended up getting kidnapped. And sadly, we end up finding out it's her future brother-in-law was behind all this. He's the one that's really in debt to some very bad people, and he needs her love. Like, it turns out her wedding ring is made from the same material that these guys use. Apparently, it was technology that Goldface is selling, but no one's buying it because they're one and dones. Like, if you use them, they break. They can only reflect one superpower, and then they break, so you need multiple ones. But it's like, well, how do you keep that in constant effect? And that's because of Becky's ring. And that's, and I think, an interesting thing. I think it basically it has a continuous effect because the ring is constantly keeping her power in effect. Basically, all her good luck is being rebound at her as bad luck. So basically, she's giving everyone else around, some people around her, good luck, and ends up like obviously reverberating all the bad luck into herself. But either way, because of that, that's the cause of all this. And I guess because it's like, right, the moment they're like, all we have to do is get the ring off, because it's like, right, it's a one-time deal. Yes, it's still an active effect right now. So that's the only reason why so it's in a perpetual permanent state as long as she's wearing the ring. That's super jacked up that it's like, right, this wedding ring I got was a gift from my brother-in-law, like, along with my my fiance, but it'd be like, yeah, this whole thing was him manipulating you, knowing that he was going to be able to take advantage of it, but your fiance wasn't going to like sit idly by and his brother do that. So that's why his brother did all this, just so that he could take advantage of her powers the moment he found out about them. So it's like probably basically thinking, we can't let this something great like these powers completely go to waste type of situation. So at the same time, once again, we find out kind of, about Cecile's circumstances. We find out that she's actually, Allegra found like the sheets and pillows. She hasn't lived in the house since Joe and Jenna left. And it seems like, once again, it's been a little while because they've at least done it a little bit. The whole like, oh, like she's come. So it probably hasn't just been like one weekend. It's probably been maybe a few weekends back to back. But the more this is happening, like it's more of a struggle for Cecile, because now she's feeling like, right, she ended up missing Jenna. She won't be there to give Jenna like her birthday breakfast, and she does it like every year, and this is going to be the year she misses it. And it's like, right, this is something she thought she could do, but now she feels like she's failing on both fronts. She feels like, right, I couldn't help Becky as a superhero, and this is supposed to be my thing. I feel like I'm failing my daughter as a mother. Like, so do I go there full time? But if I do, that means I'm kind of abandoning everything here. But if I go full superhero all the time and don't really dedicate my time to Jenna, like I'm going to be that relative that pops in every once in a while, and maybe especially at a young formative age like this, like I don't want Jenna to ever lose that connection with me as her mother. So, but for Allegra had to talk Cecile down, being like, you're not a failure, like you are a superwoman. The fact is, your daughter recognizes that. Because, like, for Cecile, like, the moment I told her, like, she was like, the moment I told Jenna I was going to be staying here and I was going to be a superhero, she was proud of me. And that's why she just feels like she's letting so many people down. But Allegra gave her the pep talk she needed, to push her in the right direction. And so when the time came, her powers worked out, got the ring off of Becky, and Becky's luck did all the rest of the work. The gun exploded, tripping down some stairs, bumping into someone else. It's like, yeah. And ultimately, her fiance wakes up, and Tony's going away for the crime and stuff like that. And now they get to have their happily ever after, which is nice. I think that's kind of nice, especially considering apparently in a different timeline you were dead pre-crisis. So it's like, yeah, no, not only did you return, you're not a bad guy. Your powers aren't being used for bad. You're a good guy, and it all worked out in the end. So I thought that was pretty dope. So I even thought it was really sweet that Cecile like invites Allegra to move in because it's like, right, you're kind of dumb dealing with your landlord type of situation, which I also thought was sweet when Chester was like, yeah, I can come over and check out your water situation. She's like, really? Is that a boyfriend thing? He's like, I don't know, but still, I'm like, oh, you two, just stop it, get a room. Even Cecile had to tell them to do that later on. But yeah, she invites Allegra to stay at her place. Especially because it's like, yeah, her biggest issue with staying in the house was like she was the only one living there. And it's like, it's a big house, it's quiet, but, having company around, I'm sure it also probably helps to have someone else look after the house anytime she's going for the weekend to go see Joe and Jenna. So it works out in that front too. So I don't know, I thought that was really nice and sweet. Another angle to this episode is that Chester is helping out Mark and Keon because it's like, right, Keon must have some powers of some kind. And so it's like, oh, we might as well check these out. And it's like, oh, like, does this test for this, and this? It's like, oh, well, will this new vest and everything you got for the combat dummy, will it test for, like, basically Freeze ability? And I love Chester being like, oh, does Mr. Freeze enjoy ice with his root beer or something like that? And it's like, yes. And which I was like, well, immediately my head, just because canonically speaking, I'm like, well, I wouldn't know Chester because we as the audience didn't get to know the Arrow versus Mr. Freeze because he was already dead. I mean, we don't know if he was already dead pre-Crisis or not. Who knows if that's a storyline beat that stayed the same, but we know, like, canonically speaking, because of Batwoman, we know he's, Victor isn't alive, he's dead. So, just one of those little things in the back of my head. I was like, oh, interesting. Not unless canonically speaking that ended up changing, but it's like, yeah, I get he was making a joke, but I'm also like, it's kind of sad too because it's kind of a morbid joke because he's dead, and obviously we know where Nora's circumstances were in that. I want to say it was like what, episode 3 or it was pretty early on in season 3 of Batwoman, I think. Either way, tangents and all that aside. But Mark's teaching Keon everything she can to try and use power. I thought they were testing out different powers, but it's like, no, Mark was hung up on the ice powers. I was like, oh, okay, so that's what this is. And he's like, right, you need to have those powers. And she's like, why do I need to have that? Like, maybe because it's like, I don't have any powers. It's like, no, Mark being in the condition he was in, he shouldn't be up and about, might not have even survived. So it's like, I love Mark being like, when you kiss, and Chester's like, what? It's like, yeah, like there's definitely something there, but I don't think it's what everyone thought it was. But for Mark, it was just, he thought that, it's like, right, you kissed me and I felt something. For him, it's that moment of like, when she kissed him, it felt like that same feeling he got when he kissed Frost. And the moment he, like, for a second when he opened his eyes, he thought she was back. But the moment he saw it was Keon, it was just like because for him, it's like, I never got to say my goodbyes to her, when it was all said and done, because they didn't think it was going to be goodbye. And because of that, he has those regrets, and that's why he just wants that second. He thought maybe at the very least now I have my second chance, but the moment he realized it was Keon and Frost was going again, it was like he lost her all over again. So it's because he wanted to believe in some shape or form that some bit of Frost exists. Like, at the very least, if her powers were there, then that means her powers, like, that part of her still exists. Like, at least it's there. At least some part of her remains, not that all of her is gone. Just like he feels like, I'm sure it's like, right, all of Caitlyn's gone, all of Frost is gone, because all that is Keon and who she is. And I love that line from Keon being like, right, she's not going, like, what Frost was kind of lives on in you. And so I immediately was thinking, I always go back to it because it's just such a beautiful sentiment. It makes me think of What If. T'Challa's final line of the What If Zombies episode was, those we've lost are never truly gone. As long as we are there as long as we are here to remember, they will always be with us and they will always live on. It's like a form of immortality in some regard. And that's exactly what Keon was trying to get across. Like, your memories, that time you spent with Frost isn't gone. You still have that. So what she was able to do for you, what her part of her will always live on through you because of, like, the love you felt for her, the memories you shared together, the time you had together. And I thought that was beautiful. And Keon touches his hands and it starts snowing. And so immediately and this was my theory, it was like, I don't think Keon is the the one with the powers. Well, she is, but I think her power is awakening latent powers. Now, either that's something she just naturally awakened in Mark, because I think the snow falling and the iceberg, I think that was him. And she just awakened it. Like I wrote, because last episode they brought up the whole thing of like, oh yeah, the seeds that Barry has grown in people. Which sounds so much wronger. It sounds so wrong, like the innuendo there, the way, but that's not how I mean it. Obviously, the seeds of the trees of like hope and being good guys, growing people and stuff like that. Once again, I do love that they were like, oh, also when this is all said and done, we have to shut down Ghostface's operation with those meta power reflectors. But either way, getting back to the point. But my thing is, like, I think she awakened a frost stability in him now. Whether that's just because it aligns with him, like, because I think the whole point was like he doesn't have any dark matter in him or anything like that. So I think she did that, and it ultimately caused all that. But what adds more layers to this, interestingly enough, is running her DNA, getting a second opinion on it. I think when like he got Carlos's opinion on it, it turns out that Keon doesn't have a trace of dark matter in her, so she isn't a meta, but also like of like the 56 strands of DNA or whatever inside of a human, whatever it is, she only has one. So she's missing the other 55. So it's like, cool, you're not a meta, but you're also not human. So it's like, what are you? And I'm like, at first I was like, immediately my brain was like, could she be a new force? Like, I mean, we know the forces exist. So I was like, and the fact is how in tune with nature she is, knowing what she knows. Like, is she, and a part of me is also wondering, like, how did you become into being then? Like, how did you get created? So now I'm wondering, like, well, we know Barry ended up destroying Caitlin's apartment and the machinery. So part of me wonders, was there still some spark of Barry's speed force powers there, which obviously connects to the speed force. So maybe during the experiment, it collided with that and basically gave birth to a new force, kind of a nature force. So that's what I'm curious about. Like, is that what she's supposed to be? I mean, because that's why I'm wondering, like, are we kind of setting Keon up to be kind of some omnipotent kind of like god level being? Maybe. That could potentially tie into one of those, once again, one of those villains I know that's supposed to return this season. We'll have to see about that. But that's what I'm thinking, and maybe that's why I'm wondering about the Mark situation of it all. Could it just be like, oh, Mark has like a piece of frost with him, both metaphorically speaking and maybe physically, like there's like just a spark of her inside of him, so maybe that's the correlation. I don't know. I'm interested to find out what her circumstances are, and I wonder, is that just going to be like a smaller background B plot to the rest of the show, or is it going to be like a major overarching theme for the rest of the show too? Because obviously this ended up being kind of its own thing type of episode. Obviously it was character developing, but just kind of its own pocket episode in that regard. But I'm wondering, is the Keon stuff going to be like the main through line, considering we've set that up and it feels like that might be the major through line. We'll see ultimately how they handle it. I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.